Advise everyone to find your people because this is what actually connects you with the place.
I pretend I'm not Armenian with the taxi driver so that they will just stay quiet and not talk.
Now, companies are in a very identity-driven challenge is how do we actually help to attract the newer generation that's coming with good technical skills?
Hi everyone, and welcome to Haylight podcast. My name is Luiza Avetisyan. I'm the co-founder and CEO of staff.am. And I'm happy to be here today, and now I'll present my guests. Lara Tcholakian is the HR director of Ucom, Armenia, and she moved to Armenia in 2004, so almost 21 years, Lara moved from Canada. Tevatrosyan moved from Russia a few years ago. She's a Birthright Armenia alumna and holds master's degree in law. And meet Jeffrey Armani, who moved to Armenia in 2021. He holds a BA in business management with emphasis on human resources management. And today we're going to talk about employment in Armenia, insights from the inside. Welcome, everyone. Lara Jan, let's start from you, and I'm going to ask all our guests today to share their stories briefly when you guys moved and what was it like at the beginning. So just the long story short. So let's start with you, Lara Jan.
So thank you, Luiza. Yes, like you said, I moved with my husband from Toronto, Canada, where I'm born, where I was raised, in 2024.
2004.
2004, correct. Thank you. So at that time, I would probably say, and I moved here and I worked with the Eurasia, what is called now the Eurasia Partnership Foundation. I was the regional director of CRRC, which is the Caucasus Resource Center. And so I was working with staff in Baku, in Tbilisi, and in Yerevan. I have to say, at that time, it was one of the most challenging decisions we made because there was practically nothing that you see now in Yerevan or outside of Yerevan. So actually having to think about staying here at a time when it was very challenging, the labor market was very different. The ethics of working in the labor force was very different then. So it was for me a very big, I wouldn't say a culture shock, but it was very challenging to integrate at a time when there were very few diasporan Armenians at that time, 21 years ago. Yeah.
Yeah. Great, thank you. So we're going to talk a lot about it today. Angel, jump please.
So my name is Angel, as it was said. I was actually born in Armenia, but I moved to Russia when I was 2 years old. So I basically lived all my life in Russia, but I've really wanted to be back to understand if I can live in Armenia. So in 2020, during my master's, I had 2 months internship at UNDP here, and I realized that I actually do want to come here to actually live here. And it just so happened that I found a job in Russia and I was working for a few years, and then I moved here, still working for the Russian company. But at that point, I just wanted to, shift to try something new, and I was just lucky enough to find the right opportunity for me at that point in life. And so I'm working for a consulting firm now here, and it is still international company, but so I like it here, and I did have a few challenges, so I'm ready to tell about them later.
Okay, thank you very much.
So I moved from Lebanon to Armenia back in 2021. Decision wasn't an easy one. It was a very risky one, but it came after the situation in Lebanon from the economic crisis, the worldwide corona, and last but not least, the Beirut port explosion. So when living there, I finally had to admit that it's not safe. And every year since 2016, every summer I used to visit Armenia for a week or two, and one of the main things I always noticed was the safety in this country, and it's something that doesn't exist in most countries. So by 2021, I had made the decision to move here. In the transaction of moving here, I already had 2 job offers here, so I made all the necessary planning. And as I came here, the life actually living here was very fast, very much more different than Lebanon. And we'll talk about that, of course.
Yes. Yeah, I hope so. Okay.
So, yeah.
So Larajan, have you been to Armenia before moving here? Like
My honeymoon.
Oh,
That was it. No, my husband, no, not in Armenia. I actually lived in Peru for a couple of years, in Sri Lanka. So all of this before moving to Armenia. So when we were going to get married, and my husband had been coming here since the earthquake in '88.
Okay, yeah.
So he was in Artsakh during the first Artsakh war. And so he was coming back and forth. And so when we were going to get married, he said, you work in these developing countries. Have you never thought about Armenia? I was like, and I thought, Armenia, the Soviet place? Like, what am I going to do? I mean, my family's from Lebanon, but, what am I going to do in this former? So he said, just let's go for a visit. And so for our honeymoon, we come.
Okay.
So obviously,
Nice
honeymoon
spot
is not necessarily the most objective way to decide if it's the place. But I have to say, it felt immediately, even after the honeymoon, even after the difficulties of moving here at a time when nothing existed. Well, I shouldn't say that, but even then it felt like I was home. And I've never felt that like that anywhere in this world. And I've traveled a lot. So, feeling at home, regardless of all the difficulties, regardless of the challenges, regardless of, yes, there are safety, but also border safety is always
Yes.
a problem for us
Exactly.
militarily. So this fear of, will there be war this year or no war this year? I still feel that regardless of all of these challenges, I can never feel as home or with myself or my family outside of the borders of Armenia.
Yeah, because when I'm thinking about repatriation in general, and I was born and raised in Armenia, but my grandfather is a repatriate. He moved with his family from Syria in mid-20th century. And he was telling that right after they landed, and it was their first time, they were like born and raised in Syria for 100 of years, their families. But it felt home immediately. And I was always questioning myself, how can something that you haven't touched, haven't seen, haven't been there, feel home just like that? So that's a question that I always ask to my guests or to whomever I'm talking. How did it feel like home? So Angel, have you been visiting Armenia before moving?
Yes, I was visiting almost like every year, every summer we came here. So it wasn't like, there was no cultural shock for me.
Okay, great. So let's move to our main topic for today, which is employment in Armenia. And I hope that with our insights and with our experiences, we can shape a general understanding for those who are maybe considering to moving or want to have a general understanding of what it is like to move to Armenia and to find a job, to build a career here. So, Larajan, my first question would be to you, given your experience and current, you're well aware of the situation in Armenia. So how would you describe the current job market? Which industry sectors are thriving, where there are some declines or maybe some dynamics? So let's start with that.
Well, that's a very challenging question to answer, only because in the past 3-4 years, and I'm sure my colleagues could also agree with this, there have been major changes to the labor market. So after COVID and after the war, and I would say ethnic cleansing of Artsakh, there was a lot of influx of migrants. So it wasn't just from Artsakh, it was also from, since the Ukraine and Russia war. So there was a big influx of different immigrants coming to Armenia that actually changed the actual face of what the labor market was, which meant that there was a lot of demand for jobs in IT. And increasingly, these past 2 years, there's been a great increase of jobs and expertise in banking and finance. The thing is that over the years, these past 2-3 years, Yes, unemployment seems to be decreasing, but the numbers do not show that. It's still well in the range of 15% unemployment. And even though the state and the government says that they're trying to reduce this, it's a bit difficult because the problem in the market is that two things. In terms of salaries, there's a big challenge. If you're coming from outside, you'll always realize the salaries here on average is always lower than what it's, for instance, in North America or in Europe. I mean, on average, for a very regular job, you'll be lucky to find a job that's between 250 and 300,000 monthly salary, thousand in terms of AMD. But what's happening is that there's a big demand of IT, and these technical jobs like DevOps and UI UX and development engineers and software engineers and all these different technical expertise, the universities are not necessarily, and local universities are not necessarily preparing the new generations to be ready for the market of that what exists now in Armenia. So there's a big disagreement of the new graduates from Armenia and what exists in the market. Now, if we talk about people coming from outside, the problem is not the jobs that you may find, it's really finding the place where actually it fits your values and the salary that you're looking for. So it's really, and I mean, I'm sure we'll talk about that, and I don't want to take the time off what my colleagues may want to say, but really the major problem now is finding the right job. Jobs exist, but not as much as what is the demand. And so in this case, with the salary, being still low in terms of wages and the expertise only in banking, finance, marketing, advertising, and IT, that means the rest of the individuals that have vocational capacities are not finding the fit. That's why the unemployment rate is still pretty high compared to other countries.
Yeah, just a couple of statistics. So if we look at staff.am data only, so on average we have 1,500 jobs at a time, active jobs, and around 15,000 traffic every day. So if, for example, 3,000 is those are people who are not looking for a job or who are not jobless at the time. But still, it's quite huge. The gap is very big. And also, it's very interesting that companies are now struggling more to hire people on vocational space, like mechanical specialists or the hardware engineers and those professions. And I always say that maybe this is where we need more people to move to Armenia because they're really very skilled, and this gap filling out which is left because of men leaving Armenia. We have some employers, they have hard time hiring mechanical engineers because these men, they left for work to Russia, etc. Mm-hmm. So it's hard to fill those positions. And I would say that maybe it's easier today to hire a software engineer or someone in banking industry rather than these positions. So yeah, that's just from my perspective. And
sorry, but just to add to that, mm-hmm. Luiza, is that the problem here is that there are lack of vocational schools in Armenia. So if there were, in terms of, let's say, what is the solution to this problem, if there were more vocational schools, because we have really good high education, right, when it comes to degrees and really good in subject matters. But when it comes to vocational subjects, we don't have schools to train those people who are electricians, plumbers, right? All of these, what you're talking about, mm-hmm. Skilled sets. And so even if we bring in people from outside to come and fulfill those, maybe I'm pretty sure the plumber or the electrician in Los Angeles will be paid 5 or 10 times more than what they're being paid here. So there has to be a really big shift in helping the local community build those skills, mm-hmm. but at the same time have realistic expectations so that the informal economy is more regulated so that you're not paying under the table.
I fully agree. In terms of vocational schools and colleges, this used to work really well, but for the last 20 years plus, maybe we need some institutions to retrain people who now want to, who didn't get higher education or vocational education when they're 20, 25, but now they're 35 or 40 and they want to be retrained. So I fully agree on that. Angel, Jeffrey, do you want to add to this question as well? So the job market in Armenia now.
Well, one thing I would add in the job market is regarding the salaries. As if you notice, the salaries have been the same almost in some sectors for a few years. And one thing that I don't know if employers are taking into consideration is the purchasing power. Like, for example, a salary of 300,000 trams per month 3 years ago would be sufficient to pay your rent, your utilities, and live a normal life. Today, of course, now newly maybe the rent is starting to come down, but after the inflation, especially after the Russian influx from 2022, 300,000 drams per month is hardly enough for anything. So that's one thing I would add in the job market. Employers need to understand that the purchasing power has changed, and that salary, which they find as an average salary, is no longer considered as an average salary because the purchasing power has decreased significantly.
Okay. So what do you think? What is needed for salaries to be reviewed? So it's not just on an employer decision. I think it comes from the market. Do you see any such, scenarios how because it goes down if we compare 2023 average salary with 2024. In 2024, in some industries we had almost no increase, like in tech sector, like almost no increase. Whereas if we compare 2022 with 2023, there was some like not a significant increase, but still there was an increase. So how do you think the salaries could be?
Well, I see some companies actually do their own research to check the market salaries of how much they're paying the wages. But the problem is these companies, they're doing individual work. There are some companies who are trying to offer the service of giving the information. However, I see because this information is not very public, it's very private, even these companies that tend to go and try to get the information of the salaries are having a hard time. To an extent, some would not give you information if you don't give your own information. Kind of close like Glassdoor, yet still some professions are very specific. For example, let's say Mandarin-speaking customer support. So, of course, that person is not going to get the same salary as an English-speaking customer support or an Armenian-speaking. So to get that number, it's quite challenging. So I believe if they can actually manage to have a certain database where everything is clear and transparent, it would help that significantly.
Okay. So in general, what are the most common challenges for job seekers in Armenia now? And if we can talk, put more emphasis on repatriate job seekers. And I would like all of you to share your views.
Well, I can say, I think the first challenge that should be raised is the language barrier. As much as many repatriates have good Armenian communicational skills, professional fluency is very important for most of the employers in Armenia, especially when it comes to some specific fields like mine, which is legal Armenian, is completely different Armenian. I had once an interview when I applied for a vacancy which said that it requires professional level of English and Russian, which I thought I fit, so I applied for it, and then it appeared that it also, I also had to have a professional language of Armenian, which was not mentioned there.
Yes.
Which was.
They thought by default it's.
Yeah, he also mentioned it it was, but by default. But as a lawyer, I also I see what I read only. So, so that one, and also I would say the tools that the repats use, that I was accustomed to in Russia. There is no headhunter here. There is no alumni chat that I can just send my CV to and, wait for offers. So I had to adapt to this reality, to find new tools, to understand what actually works here. And only then I could actually like, find the solution for myself.
So do you think what would prepare you well for, integrating more easily, or, understanding that, for example, compared to Russia, job seekers here don't wait when they are contacted by employers, like in Headhunters database, but rather they apply through platforms like staff.am. Would knowing it in advance help you? And in what ways do you think you could have access to that information?
I think Repat Armenia actually helped me a lot in these terms. Like, as I mentioned, language barrier. I passed 3 months courses from Repat Armenia, which helped me a lot. And then again, staff.am, which I applied to. So I think these tools, if they are just given to the repatriate, this should be more or less enough. Although I would also mention the network, the importance of network in Armenia is a bit more than in other places. So you really need to go to meetups, just join the community here and try to integrate, and only then you will be noticed, because otherwise it's just difficult to come here. And although you may be a great professional, you will just remain unnoticed.
Okay, yeah. Thank you, Angela, for sharing. Jeffrey?
Well, first of all, before coming to Armenia, one thing that would greatly help if there was like some orientation sessions at the embassies of our main countries, where, for example, you can go to some orientation courses that can tell us what to expect, what to do, what are the laws here, what are the rules here, the medical registration that we need to do, the residency registration, which for unfortunately, like in Lebanon, we don't have it, but maybe most countries they do. That would actually help us to understand the living here, and which is connected to finding a job here. Now, when it comes to find a job, maybe it's because us as Armenians, we're very homogeneous. We tend to feel more comfortable with what we know. So let's say when you come here and you still don't know anyone and you don't have the networking skills yet, it is very challenging to find a job, because what I've noticed that predominantly, maybe not everyone, the people here, they feel more comfortable with, working with people they know. So
but
when
but isn't it like that everywhere? I think it's
not necessarily everywhere. But at the same time, when you do your networking and when you prove yourself and everybody knows you, it does open doors. But at the same time, you always sometimes hear you need to have sometimes 2 CVs, one in Armenian, one in English. Like sometimes the job requirement says you need to have a C1 level English. And when you apply it in English and the person, who's maybe is doing the screening doesn't know English, might not even look at the resume. Those are cases I actually saw sometimes. But the thing is, in order to manage to find a job here, you need to understand how the people think. You need to understand how the recruitment is working. You need to understand how the ATS system is working. And if you can outmaster that, the doors just open magically.
And you said that you had 2 job offers when you were moving to Armenia.
Yes.
Can you talk about it, like elaborate more?
So they were both customer support positions, which required multilingual and to be native in these languages. So since I'm native in Arabic and English and in my own Western Armenian, and I knew a bit of French, so I was exactly what they wanted, because they had multiple clients and they wanted multiple languages, like not a person just bilingual in 2 languages. So I was fortunate enough to get 2 offers. And as I moved here, I kind of took my sweet time and chose the best offer among those. Okay,
great. Lara, do you want to share about
I want to add just
maybe
one point.
from HR perspective more than...
I'll talk... Well, I think it'll be a combination of both. I think, you know what, Luiza, I think for me, what I learned, it was mostly about myself. When I moved here, I had a sense of arrogance that I knew, because I was from Canada, and I was going to be, helping the locals learn how to be, a better professional. And I think what was important was for me to change my worldview, my perspective, and not come with this sense of, I know and I'm going to right? And I'm not saying all of the repats are like this. I'm just saying there has been a tendency of many people moving from different countries because they have certain degrees, especially North America or from Europe, that they have an upper hand compared to the education of people in Armenia. And that is, for me, one of the things that I would always tell anybody who wants to move here. Ground yourself, come back to earth, and I'm not trying to insult anybody. I'm using this as my own example to bring myself back to earth, because actually the local Armenians taught me much more than what a degree in France or a degree in Canada had provided me. And that was just, the integration we mentioned. And it's also about really doing the research. Some people come and say, I've got all of these, I have all this experience in North America, I have all this experience in all these different countries, I speak all these languages, I should be able to have an easily access to job. And then when you meet with them and you say, oh, you say that you're speaking, for instance, French. And so you start speaking to them in French, and their French is broken. So the thing is, it's coming to be much more realistic and much more grounded, much more human, and really doing that kind of research of who's out there that can help me understand what's about the market. Your organization staff.am or Repat or AVC or Birthright, there's so many wonderful resources now that I never had. So I had to really struggle to make that network, because you're right, not every country may be the same way. But usually in many cases, if I know someone, I'm going to want to give that person a bigger chance than a resume I've never met. So it's kind of like I already have the bias, and that bias will. So if I've already kind of had that chance to meet with people and understand what is needed, and I've done the research, and I know how to present myself in different situations as a repat, I think I'll have a better chance. I'm not saying the best chance, but a better chance than just coming in the desert and just kind of expecting that things will fall in my lap.
Yeah. Thank you, Lara. And can we say that it was a big surprise for you, or maybe in a manner a cultural shock, what you expected people to be like here in terms of professionally, in terms of
just people,
supportive, just people.
Yeah. I think I don't know if Angela or Jeffrey will feel this way, but I grew up in a way in a small city called Hamilton outside of Toronto. And whenever we went somewhere and there was somebody speaking Armenian, we would think, oh my God, he or she is Armenian. So for us, anybody who's Armenian is like Sırputyun, right? It's like for us, it's like I know it's not right to think this way because every human is equal, but I mean, for me, It was more of this thing of, oh, this is great. And so when we moved here, automatically the way I grew up was like, whoever's Armenian is going to be my friend, or whoever's Armenian is going to be my, a person who's going to look out for me. Boy, was I wrong, because Armenia is a country like any other country. It has its flaws. It has its good sides, its bad sides. It has its corruption. It has its legal issues. It has its, but you tend to not think that. You think everything about Armenian is clean and good and saintly. And so it was a very big wake-up call for me to just accept Armenia as another country with all its issues. And I'm going to be coming here not just to make a living for my family, but also be part of nation building, to help build the society, not me by myself, but together. And really, so that's where my perspective changed. It wasn't like the savior issue. It was more of together, how do I collectively work to help build this place a better one for my children and my children's children, and that we make sure we don't lose the territory we already have. Right?
So can we say, Lara, that it was a mission, and this is where Armenia had competitive advantage compared to Peru and other countries that you lived in before moving to Armenia. So here you feel this sense of ownership that, this is my country, and I have some, I wouldn't say responsibility, but some ownership to build it and to live it better to coming generations. Did you feel that way when you were moving, or when you just moved?
I did. But I also was very hurt the first year I went through a depression. I mean, that was the time where I think there was only one supermarket, and that was Galaxy on Kievian Street. There was no supermarket. I don't know if you guys remember this, but you remember, you're too young. But it was like there was no supermarket. You know, I was coming at a time when I came from, you know, a place where consumer-driven, everything was available in Canada, and I'm coming here and not everything is available. So for me, the first year was a very, very challenging one where I questioned my own identity. Because all these years I always thought, I'm, you know, being raised as an Armenian in a foreign country, even though I'm born and raised there, I don't feel at home, but I'm coming here and I feel at home, but I'm not being accepted. Because I'm not part of the, you know, I didn't grow up whether it's with the Soviet issues, or I didn't grow up in the pug or the backyard or the schools. So it was always this difficulty of understanding what my identity was. And that's when I realized, Luiza, was that you can't expect somebody from outside to help change that for you. You have to take ownership. You have to be accountable for how you're going to be changing your own life. And so if I know that I feel comfortable on this land, regardless of all the difficulties that we had then, and that was more challenging then I'm going to have to make the efforts to step up. And if that means learning more, even at that time there was no English, it was mostly Russian. God, I knew nothing of Russian, right? So it was my job to be able to try to find ways to integrate, not wait for others to accept me. And that way, when people saw that I was making the effort, then the doors were opening more for me. So it's more of you accepting, not waiting for others only. It's also how you actually start to change, to develop things. And you're right, to take ownership and accountability.
Angela, very interesting to hear your perspective on this. So when you were moving, was that some call of motherland, or you were just, this was a rational decision that, you know, I can build a better life in Armenia? And in that perspective, what expectations you had and what was the reality, which then caused some cultural shocks or, unmet expectations?
Yes, well, I made a decision to move like very quickly. It was a one-day decision, and actually I myself, I'm still surprised how easy that decision was made and how quickly I just packed my bags and moved. And I never regretted it for a day in my life. That's actually surprising for me too. There's a good saying in Russian, «Свой среди чужих, чужой среди своих». So I've always felt like a local in Russia, like a local amongst foreigners. And here, I at first did feel as a foreigner among actually my people. So yes, I did have to adapt to this reality, to see that not everything works as I was used to. Like there's no instant delivery, the services.
Which now we have.
Yeah.
And we have many supermarkets. Everything is very nice
yes.
here. Consumer driven finally, which I'm not sure if it's good or not.
Yes,
good point.
Yes, but still like services are not that customer friendly, I would say. It has improved a lot through these years, but
we're trying very hard, guys. So there
has been great improvements in customer service.
Yeah, there has been, but
they're smiling now. They greet you with a smile. That's an improvement.
Yeah, but I think I did well. I don't know. I've what helped me was for sure birthright. I made friends. This was the one thing that I liked most. I did have family here. I have relatives. I often see them, but friendship was something that I was missing a lot. And I didn't realize it until I was, I think, 1 year in here. I was working day and night, so I didn't even notice that I had this issue. And then I realized that I don't even have anyone to just go to the cinema with. And that was the moment when I realized that I do need to communicate more with people. And I found out that people who are in the same mindset, the same situation, are the most easy for me to communicate with. So I started with Birthright, and I am proud to say that this year I celebrated my birthday here, which was an event for me, because before that I just used to fly back to Russia or to anywhere else to just escape this reality that I don't have anyone to invite to. But yeah, so I try to, and I advise everyone to find your people, because this is what actually connects you with the place.
Okay, Angela, thank you very much for sharing. And Jeffrey, you said that you've been to Armenia before.
Yes.
But when you visit as a tourist or as like short-term stay, like visiting some family, it's very different when you actually decide to move. So what were your cultural shocks or these unexpected things that you had still to overcome?
Well, to be honest, every summer when I visited for a week or 2 weeks, I always felt a sadness leaving Armenia. So when coming here, I was very excited because I knew I was coming to a country, not just the safety, it's just like these public gardens, the friendly puppies, dogs, and cats, which I'm very fond of animals. But at the same time, I was very prepared. I had a system put in place. And one of the things I put in the system was not to like socialize a lot with the local population, because one of my main weak points is like, because I grew up in a country where the minorities were Armenians, like we're always nice to each other. But I knew that's not going to be the case here.
So you knew in advance.
I knew in advance, and I chose to maybe decrease it as much as I could. But unfortunately, although I tried it, I did meet some people who just, I don't know, they loved me from day one, and they forced themselves over me, saying like, why don't you like us? Come on. And they keep inviting me and keep inviting me. In the end, like, you have to accept the invitation. And today, these locals, although I met a lot of diasporans here as well, these local people, they're like family to me. And I care about them a lot, and they care about me a lot. And like, although I put barriers, I just pushed them away, they wouldn't have it. And they're actually well-educated people. They all have good jobs, good careers. They're actually really nice people. And that was a shock for me, because and from where I come from, when you push someone away, they go away.
They go away.
Here, no, they don't accept it. And they're very persistent. And yeah, that was very surprising.
But I would say that you're lucky to meet such people, because sadly in Armenia, this intimacy and this, being very supportive to each other, this is vanishing bit by bit, unfortunately. Like, neighbors are not that friendly anymore. We moved to a new house, we barely speak to our neighbors, not because we don't like them or they don't like us. It's because we don't have time to invite them over a coffee or, chat for 5 hours during the weekend, which was happening when I was a child, 30 years ago. So in that perspective, I think when you meet such people who really care for you and don't get pushed away when you actually, out of some reasons, push them away, I think we all have to keep them aside. So you're happy to meet these people. Anything else you want to add to culture shocks, or finding a job as a job seeker in Armenia? Maybe some ideas came to your mind.
I would say that I did have some cultural shock at my job site. Coming from a well-structured and organized community, this was a big surprise for me, that deadlines can actually be quite flexible. Meetings can last longer than expected, and that people actually tend to make friends during, working hours, and this is something that I'm not used to. I used to always keep a professional relationship, not trying not to overstep somebody's boundaries. But here there are actually no boundaries, and this is something that can be both heartwarming and actually misleading too, because you have to be able to separate professional and personal now a lot more. This was quite challenging for me at the beginning. Now I hope I am coping a bit better. So yes, this is it.
I do have actually a suggestion as well, and that's probably for repats moving to Armenia, I think there's a matter of having realistic expectations. And many employers, they look for not just the technical capacity that you have written in your resume. So you may fill out all the checks and the boxes that, the job announcement may have. It's also a cultural fit and the values of the company that actually are aligned with the applicant. There have been many cases where applicants from outside, they'll apply and they say, well, look, I'm fitting and even locals, they'll say, look, all the job announcements, I fit all the requirements. And then you meet with them, it really is a very big disengaged, or a very big difference in values and culture. And so I think what I try to propose is whenever you go, and there are many job fairs as well, it's not just, going to hr.am or staff.am, but there's also all these different job fairs that exist. And when you go, it's not just to look for the job, it's also to meet with the different employers to see, does their culture or does their value system align with mine, so that when I come to meet with them for an interview, potentially, we're speaking the same language. And at the same time, have I done enough research about that company to be able to understand, do I know what their missions are, what they're doing? It's not just I want the job, but how much am I invested in my time to do that kind of, research? So I think my recommendation is for anyone looking for a job in Armenia, and for anywhere for that matter,
yes,
really make sure that you understand what that company or that institution stands for. Make sure that you have all your questions aligned. Really show that you have the culture fit and you speak that language. So it's not just, look, I've got the IT expertise, I've got the languages, I've got the experience that they want. There's much more to it. There's a lot more of the soft people skills, the human-centered approach that now companies are looking for much more than just the technical and educational capacity.
Yeah. I strongly agree with you, Lara. I would just add that sometimes due to lack of many opportunities and of scarcity, people just choose something just to be employed and solve like minimal problems and afford their rent and food. And then at the second level where they can really research and find the company. So it's not always the same and not on all levels. So I would just add that because we deal with this a lot. We even created a separate online course free of charge where we talk about it and we explain that always do your research, go to company events, to those job fairs, read about them. But at the end of the day, when company is hiring 100 people a month and who are not going to stay there for more than 7 months, but for 7 months you're going to afford your rent, your food, etc. Sometimes they just don't pay attention to it much. So it's something that not everyone can afford, but if you can afford, always research. And there are many resources now. Companies are telling about themselves in nice stories and videos, and leaders are going to different podcasts, and that's also very interesting to listen to a CEO's podcast. You can learn more about many things about the company.
You said something that actually also triggered something else. We were building our house here, and a lot of the constructors that we were looking for, they were either busy because all these buildings are being built in Armenia, and so you won't find contractors or constructors or electricians very easily. And so we were able to find even from Syrian or Lebanese newly moved Armenians, and they were able to actually just have when we speak to them, how are you getting these jobs, like these electrician or pump plumbing or contractor jobs? And they said, well, we did exactly what you just explained, Luiza. We started doing small jobs. It helped us to learn the Russian languages, how, you don't know all these terms, and there's no word of...
And most of them are in Russian.
They're all in Russian, I don't know, like if you're going to sandpaper the wall, there are certain terms. And so he was explaining to us that I was able to take small paid jobs just so that I can start learning the electrical Russian words to be able to speak their language so that if I need to do something, I can speak the language. And now many people are actually coming after me as an electrician or a plumber or a whatever, because now I'm able to really integrate into their language, their way of working, but I do a better job. You know, so what you're saying is really important, that sometimes it's okay to take a step back to learn a little bit about what's happening in the market, then actually have the legacy or the name or the brand, so that people will be able to come to you for specific things.
And in terms of, Angel, what you said about deadlines and being more friendly at the workplace, I think it depends on the industry and the size of the company. Smaller companies are more, offer this, I wouldn't say warmer, but like in a small company, you know everyone and you build relationships with them and you know everything about. I mean, I'm sitting with my team. We have open space office, and I want it or I don't want it, but I literally know everything about them. So in that perspective, it really depends on the company. And if it's a local company or has a head office, for example, Russian head office companies are different from US companies. US companies are different from European countries, Chinese or Asian, Southeast Asian head office countries. Their cultures are very different. So in that perspective, for example, I wouldn't say that this is a common trait in all organizations in Armenia. I would say that it rather depends on the size of the company. But of course, we are warmer, and we do the same with our international colleagues. I worked for HSBC for 10 years, and whenever we were doing a big project that would spend like 12 to 18 months, at the end we were talking, everyone would say Luiza Jan, they wouldn't say Luiza, but they were like from India or from the UK or Canada, etc. And the same, you couldn't just type, I don't know, Verinda. You would say Verinda Jan, because it wouldn't be nice, because but you haven't met the person. So in that perspective, we are more friendlier and want to know more about the person. And that can be a bit shocking, I guess. So when you were talking about it, I thought, okay, so what a shock it was too.
But this is what I'm saying. It's a bit more a personal approach here. I used to work for an international venture capital firm, which did research local companies too, and they tried to negotiate with several of them, but no deal was signed. And I think the reason for that is because nobody actually came to have a coffee with the founder, which is the way that work is done here. So there needs to be a personal approach here, regardless of the size of the company still. Yeah.
And I would add that personal approach, I think, applies to many cultures and many countries, and including drinking the coffee. Okay, thank you very much for your contribution. I want to ask my next question, which is about organizations and companies and platforms that help you guys, and some that you know of. But before that, I would like to share that together with Repat Armenia and staff.am, we launched a joint platform this year, at the beginning of this year. It's called, you can reach it at staff.am/Repat. And there are companies who post jobs specifically for repatriate candidates, which means that these companies are either have positions that they are ready to hire repatriates, or these positions were open specifically for repatriates. Currently, there are more than 110 companies registered there. Not all of them have already posted jobs, but some of them already did, and it's evolving. So I wanted to add that. And my question would be, what were the organizations that you turned to and who helped you to integrate? And of course, I know one of them is Repat Armenia for sure, and you mentioned that. But what is there now, and what helped you guys so when you repatriated?
There are some restaurants, I wouldn't say NGOs, that have these events for people with similar likings. For example, some of them have wine events, some of them had movie events, which kind of helped me meet people around here and integrate easier in Armenia. And there also, of course, staff.am also did help us find jobs. And like you mentioned also, Repat Armenia, that's, I would say, 60 to 70%, because whenever we have a question or anything we want to get the answer from, the go-to place was always, personally for me, it was Repat Armenia. And they were always helpful. And even if the person there didn't know the answer, they would find a Repat who actually had an answer.
Yeah.
Yes.
That's what the power of the big network. Angel?
Yes, I agree. It was Repat for me too. Birthright, and maybe like LinkedIn, basically. I also had a few chats, Telegram chats, that featured some jobs for Russian speakers. And yes, I think networking too, like going to events that are related to my field and trying to build this network that I didn't actually have.
Okay.
Don't ask me. They didn't have anything at that time. I was all by myself. No, I mean, but I have to say there was, apart from what's already been mentioned, it's really, there's also the High Commissioner for the Diaspora, I know works closely also with Repat and very different organizations. But, she mentioned LinkedIn. I've received many people messages, just personal messages from people from outside of Armenia saying, hey, I'm thinking of coming. I see that you're from Canada, or I see that you have experience in these, could you give me some updates? So people will find ways, definitely, to start really, we're very creative Homo sapiens. We'll find ways to be able to, apart from what already exists, to know what to do to move here. And the resources now are just endless. They're incredible. And it's not just from AI-driven resources. Anything that's available, we can get access to. So.
Yeah, thank you, Lara. And I want to summarize in terms of practical steps for Repat. So we talked about many things and a number of organizations. So I want to sum up, then we will move forward. So Lara, you mentioned that it's very important to do their research, to do their homework. And part of them would be reaching out to people who are already repatriated, who are CEOs of the companies, HRs, and, people with big networks. Whoever reached out to me through LinkedIn or through other platforms, I always replied back and helped them in any way. So there are many people here that are willing to help. So first of all, repatriates before moving to Armenia need to do their homework and research well. The second one is be prepared to really adapt to local realities. And that would include some, language lessons, some Russian, words maybe, or just a general understanding, which is not always necessary, but still it would help a lot. Then to research a lot platforms like staff.am, like LinkedIn, so to get understanding of the events. There are many events taking place in Yerevan, in Armenia in general now, and many people are attending there. Most of the events are free of charge. So I would say that whenever someone is in Armenia already, it's a good idea to visit these events and meet people, talk with them. So that's another hands-on tool. And in terms of resumes, you mentioned that you had both in English and Armenian. Actually, for majority of jobs, English resume is good. Enough. Yeah. So in very few roles when the job description is specifically in Armenian and there is definitely no need for English, and English resume would not be considered a good thing to be sent to the HR, then send the Armenian one. But the English one is really definitely enough. Don't be surprised, nicely surprised that all positions, majority of positions are in English. That's how it is. We get so many messages, why are all these positions in English? And we're saying that companies are posting them. So anything that I missed, I would like to you guys to add up, and then we will move forward and talk about companies and their cultures.
Just one more thing. I would like to add that cultural shock. The Snickers bar. So one time when I was going, they're like, I was just new, and they're like, they were telling me, we know you're different, but sometimes a newcomer brings some snacks and everything. I'm like, I know. So I had a whole bunch of those sneakers, mini
office?
snacks. Yeah. So I brought those, and people were happy, but these close people, which I mentioned, they're like, why are you doing this? Why did you spend so much money? I'm like, okay, what else am I going to do? They're like, just get one Snickers bar and we'll cut them up into small pieces. Now, at first I thought she was being sarcastic. The next day, when I saw one of them bring the Mars bar, cut them into small pieces, and everybody shared them, I was like really surprised. Like, is this a thing?
No, it's not.
Well,
At least out of all these years, I've never seen that happen.
Yeah, I'll explain where it comes from.
But I
Jeffrey.
did like it. And like, for example, like maybe in other cultures, they would find that like maybe the meaning, or they're like, what is this? But here, and when I saw it, I actually embraced it and I actually liked it. So every day I started to get a different kind of chocolate, and they didn't care what it was. Just we used to cut it into small pieces and just share it with each other.
Yeah. So in 90s, when there were no fancy brands and supermarkets and all these, Snickers and Mars, they were here. So maybe one of the first good-looking and well-tasting like chocolate bars were here. Before that, I don't even want to say what we had. So it was a very fancy thing. Snickers bar was a fancy thing. And when you get one, you wouldn't eat it for yourself. It would be very selfish. And if you had like 8 people in your family, then you cut Snickers into 8 parts. So it remained. I didn't know that it still happens. But what it means is that this is a precious thing, and they are sharing this precious thing with you. So every time you guys see Snickers bar cut into like thin pieces, grab one, because someone shares really something precious. Now, we don't even eat that much chocolate and sugar because, it's not healthy. But like 30 years ago, it was something.
It was a luxury.
Yeah, it was a luxury. Okay, so let's move forward and talk a bit about companies here and corporate culture, how it is. Angel, you talked a bit about it, but I would like more to give more understanding to people who watch us and who listen to this podcast today. What are Armenian companies like? So, Lara Can, you work for a big company here in Armenia, big in terms of Armenian concept. So, let's start from you. How are Armenian companies like?
I can't answer that.
You can't?
No, because it depends on the leadership, right? If I were to say, all Armenian companies are this way, it's not true, because it all depends on the type of leadership that Armenian company has. If we're only talking about Armenian companies, not, let's say, international ones.
No, we're talking about just companies in Armenia.
Okay, in Armenia, companies. Yeah. Well, it all depends. If somebody were to say, Armenian-based companies are worse than international-based companies in Armenia, I would disagree. Yeah, and vice versa as well. I really think that the culture is really developed by the executive leadership wherever you go. There have been really good very good leaders, and when I say leaders, I mean senior top executives and even board members that actually bring in good values and that actually disseminate down to the company. It's always difficult to find good managers, though, because I think what's happening, or at least when I was teaching at AUA at the time, anybody who would actually graduate would think, I have to be a manager now. So it was always this problem of having decent team leaders or team managers. But if there is good leadership, and this is where I think good research comes, you will identify companies in Armenia, small or large, that actually have very good leadership, and they do make the effort to really disseminate a good cultural ethics and value. Now, the question is, does it work? Well, that's a problem we were talking earlier. It doesn't always work if you're just saying, I want to have psychologically safe or trustworthy company. It really is something that you have to practice. And so you will have to be careful as to not just saying it's a good company. Look inside the company, and your best bet is to ask people who work in the company. How do they feel working for that company? And that will give you the brand of that employer to say if it's a good company or not. Now, people will always criticize. That it's so easy to criticize and say everything that's bad. But when you generally ask the employees if there are really good or positive input, you'll be able to know that in that company, most likely there's much more positive than negative things. You'll always find an imperfect company. But tell me which country has the most perfect company, right? And that's why you'll go to MIT and Harvard Business Reviews and they're still writing things about good leadership because it doesn't exist. But so I always say, look inside the company, ask people who work there, but don't ask one person because that'll be a very subjective answer. Ask a few people and that will give you an indication in terms of the culture, but it always starts from the leadership, always.
Fully agree with you. Angeljan, anything you want to add to the fact that we don't like deadlines and we're very, very friendly?
Yeah, I would say that I think I mentioned that the corporate culture here is heavily relationship driven. That the fact that unfortunately it has to be said that nepotism also flourishes. So you have to find ways to go through that ladder, avoiding a lot of obstacles, really. But if you're a good professional and you have communicational skills and you have luck, you could succeed in that.
Okay. Anything you want to add?
I basically said almost everything, and everything was said by both of them. So I don't specifically have anything else to add.
Okay. So I would just give, since we work with more than 5,000 companies, and that's and for more than 8 years. So I would like to give just a general, I always say deeply subjective view of corporate world in Armenia. So it changed and evolved a lot for the past 10 years. Why 10 years? Because it's when 10 years ago, it's when tech ecosystem started to rapidly grow. And that really affected the rest of the larger corporate world in a way that IT companies started to grow and new international companies opened offices here in Armenia, and they really started to change the overall scene of corporate world in Armenia. They started to headhunt people from banking, from other industries, including education, and they started to build nice offices where people really wanted to work and they wanted to go there. So that really changed how banking started to employ people, to train, to treat. And at some point, banks had their IT divisions. And when you go into some of the banks, you wouldn't feel that you are in a bank. I worked in a banking system for 10 years, and I know how a bank feels and looks. And then after COVID, when the boundaries were, started to vanish and much information was accessible, this line between international company and local, because international used to be good, local used to be not very good. So this bias existed for many years. Now, I would say for the past 3-4 years, it doesn't matter if it's a small company, it can be really good, and a big international one can be not really good one, with poor employer brand or high attrition rates. Employees wouldn't recommend this employer to their friends, etc. So now I wouldn't say specifically that, there is a good choice, choose this one, choose an international company or choose a local company. A couple of days ago, we had this discussion at Coca-Cola, international versus local companies, which ones are more preferable and which ones are not. And the conclusion was that now it really doesn't matter. And with new generation coming into workforce, they really don't care whether this is an international company or a local company. And also I would add that and would sum up with that many big companies and groups in Armenia are family held. And that's from one perspective is good because of the values, etc. From another perspective, if we compare to, for example, North American or the US market specifically, the governance is very different because there it's more institutional. In Armenia, it's family held. We don't have that many publicly listed companies, etc. So in a nutshell, when I am asked what it is like, the Armenian cultural corporate world, how it looks like, so this is my explanation. If you don't agree, I would very much accept any challenges in that perspective.
No, I don't think there's a question of disagreement. I think what you said is absolutely very rational and very true. I think in the case of apart from 10 years ago, I think the fact that there have been also increase of competition. Like I remember the time when we had just the Greek telecom company, right? What was that called? Armentel.
Yes.
Right? I mean, everybody complained about Armentel when at that time until you had a competition that came and helped raise the bar.
Yes.
And so I think many things is about, but in terms of culture, when you have different companies come, they start to actually have employment wars, which means how do I make sure that I get the right human resource? How do I make sure that I'm talking about larger companies, obviously, and even smaller IT or startup companies, they want the best resources. They want the ones that actually have. So what happens is that now, even it's not just the culture that's important. Let me see how I can get Jeremy for a higher price, right? Should I increase my salary or not? And so can I afford that? And so what's happening is that because of the competition, people are now trying to improve certain things to get the better, image. Not in all cases will they pay the right salary. It may be just let me show that I have a beautiful building. But now with the newer generation coming, especially Gen Z, companies have to be ready to know what does that newer generation want. The older generation, in my case, was always like having a stable income, having the career, work hard, you have these. So the Gen Z now is coming, the newly graduate, and you and I have sons that are at this age who now are thinking, I don't need a job going to an office. I can be an entrepreneur and make more money than my parents do. So what's happening is that companies, in terms of, I know we're shifting in terms of culture because your question was about culture. Now companies are in a very identity-driven challenge is how do we actually help to attract the newer generation that's coming with good technical skills? I don't know, whatever it is. But at the same time, they're not able to stay in the job for a long time because they're always looking for the next best thing. And not just in terms of money, but in terms of meaning of life, right?
In terms of experience.
So I think the challenge is going to be not just, do I have the right brand or the culture? Is, am I speaking the language of what the market is demanding? And am I able to be flexible and agile enough to maneuver these new labor changes and challenges? So this is where I would like to just say, yes, but. Like, are we ready as companies to not just think about brand and culture, but also about what's coming next in terms of transformation in a very, very aggressive world.
Yes. Yeah. And do you think our hiring practices really align with these massive changes that are coming, including generative AI?
Unfortunately not.
And is it ever possible to keep up with all those dynamics?
Well, I think so. I think now there's a lot of things that are being automated, right? So I think it's going to be very easier to be able to identify, in Armenia, let's say in this case, to be able to have the tools. I'm sure there will be a time where if companies are automated, they'll be able to automate with staff.am, and so that automatically whatever you receive, the companies will receive as well at the same time and fit. If I say, okay, I'm looking for a person who has digital marketing skills, has 5 years experience, is a French speaker, blah, 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 and boom, it should be able to give, so you see, so the tools will be there. How I'm going to be able to be humanly with those individuals is something else. And this is where we're lacking. We're lacking, and we're really good when it comes to technical skills, really lacking when it comes to human and understanding this whole world of how do I speak the language of others.
Interesting.
Speaking of hiring, I'm not sure if it's totally aligned with the topic, but I'm really curious to hear from HR perspective. There was a company that I just heard it happened, and I want to understand if it's a trend that you're seeing or it's just something that this company did. When they were reviewing for a vacancy, several people, so they preferred an immigrant from Russia to a relicant from Armenia. But when the relicant was said that the person needs to know Armenian, although so the thing is, if you are viewed as an immigrant, you are viewed as an international expert. But if you're a relicant, you have to know Armenian, and you're actually given the practically same salary that is average to the market. Although to an immigrant, they would be ready to
pay more.
Yeah.
It's a very challenging point. I haven't faced personally this situation because I'll tell you why. But I'm not saying it doesn't exist. I'm just saying in my case, in my experience, what we look for is always a person who is just the right fit. I don't care if they're from, I don't know, they have 3 PhDs, but if they're the right fit, that's the salary that's fixed for that position. That's what the pay will be. Now, obviously, there's some room for negotiation going down or going up, but there's a boundary that's there. So, but you raised 2 things. One was the salary for insider and outsider, which I want to just say something, and I'm sure you can also say something too. And the other one was about, you mentioned something else that I just want to say.
That an immigrant is viewed as an international expert.
No, it was something else about recruitment mechanism. And I think every company has their own recruitment methods. Some could be very, very bureaucratic, and that could be a very lengthy process. Some could be very swift because they're very agile. I don't know, you may have to go through security checks or compliance checks or, all these different. So that could be a very lengthy process depending on the standards and the policies of that company. But putting aside, if there is fairness in the company, fairness meaning that for me, I will not look at your gender. I will not look at your age. In fact, I don't even want you to put a picture on your resume so that I can judge you in advance, right? Whereas in Armenia, still they put the picture on the resume, and still the date of birth, when technically I should be judging you based on your capacity and your interview process and maybe the testing that you go through. So I think to answer your question is it all depends on the company. It depends on their value system. It depends on their culture. But if they start actually judging people based on internal or external, I think that is a big mistake because you are missing out on tapping on good talent just because you're labeling them as internal or external or immigrant or international. There are very good, competent talents here in Armenia, people who have actually gone abroad to study and they've come back, and they're locals. And so why should I actually judge and think that an immigrant is going to be much more talented? What if they were not qualified in that country? And just because they're here, that doesn't mean an international person is more qualified than local. So,
yeah,
but it really depends on the company. If they do judge people like that, I say stay away from them. Sorry, but
I know.
they're not.
It was quite unfair, and
no, it's not right.
For some moment, I even thought maybe I should just act as an immigrant and not even make them know I know Armenian, and they maybe.
Would you really want to work for a company that actually does that?
No.
Because then they'll be having different pays for the same position, same glass. They'll pay somebody much more higher and lesser and for the same job. Do you think that's right? I wouldn't work for a company like that. But again, I shouldn't talk. That's for people to choose for themselves,
I pretend I'm not Armenian with the taxi driver, so that they will just stay quiet and not talk. That's the only time I pretend I'm not Armenian.
Avoid the small talk.
It's not small. It's very long, very boring.
But you have some educated taxi drivers too.
Actually, yes. And there was one person who, I saw he had a picture of Naruto, and I was surprised. And when I told him that's Naruto, he was very happy. He called his girlfriend, and he said, I found a driver who watches anime. Yeah, and that guy was one of the coolest drivers I actually saw. Some of them are, but some of them, like, I don't know, like as soon as I take a seat, I can tell if the person is going to talk for long hours, start politics and all kinds of things, and tell me what I have to do so I can reach the level of Armenian I'm supposed to. And some, I just feel comfortable with them. And that's when I say, yes, I am Armenian.
Okay, so let's move forward. And if we can just finalize in terms of advices that you personally would give to repatriates that are planning to come to Armenia. So you talked about your experiences, how you have overcome many challenges, even depression, as you mentioned, Lara. So if you just sum up in maybe 3 very practical points, like bullet points, it would really help to, with consolidating all this wisdom we shared today. Can we start? Let's start with Angela.
Yeah, I hope I would be quite short. So the first one is learn Armenian.
Mm-hmm.
Second
Learn
one
Armenian.
is use the local tools, get to know them and use them. Third is build your community, find friends, be friends with colleagues.
Mm-hmm.
Here it's appropriate.
From day one.
Yes.
So do all those things from day one.
Network. And I would say be proactive, stubborn even. If the door is not open, you can find another way always. One of the job sites that I found for Birthright was actually messaging the person personally. And the CEO just responded me and invited me for the interview. So otherwise, they told me it was all booked.
Okay, so sometimes you just need to be straight and reach out to the decision maker. Yeah, that
Don't
can
be afraid to do it,
Yeah.
for sure.
Okay, yeah, because you don't have anything to lose. You just get no answer. That's the worst thing that can happen. Okay, Angela,
Correct.
thank you very much.
Well, I would say besides the language, you need to just look in the mirror and understand what kind of lifestyle do you like. If you're the type that likes to go party, you like to go to the beach, you're the one who likes to go Starbucks on a daily basis and like to grab from McDonald's, Armenia isn't for you. We don't have McDonald's yet. We don't have Starbucks.
Thankfully,
We don't have Starbucks. We don't have a beach. We have Sevan.
Yeah. We have better coffee than Starbucks, by the way.
Yes.
I'm not saying which is better. I'm saying we don't have Starbucks. That's all I'm saying.
You're right.
And the fact that, Armenia, it's not the kind of country where these things would be considered as a necessity. These are luxuries. So you need to know what kind of lifestyle do you like and which one are you comfortable with. For example, me personally, and this was my point of argument, which I managed to get my parents off my back to move here. I told them, I like going to parks. I like animals. I like just walking around. I like just, go on nature walks. And this is all Armenia. So I can live here because these are what Armenia offers, and this is what I like. Of course, it offers much more, but these are the things that I feel comfortable with, and I found it here, which I can't easily find it in Lebanon. It's more mountainous. Walking is harder.
No sidewalks.
Yes, no sidewalks. And if there are, they take it out and just make streets out of them. The animals are very scared of humans, and you hardly see any. Some areas, I heard they're eating cats. I don't know. But here, the animals, they're very friendly. Plus, from the ears, you can tell how friendly they are. If it's a green.
Different color.
Yeah, the green, the yellow, the red. And even the reds are friendly. I was surprised. I was expecting it to be aggressive. So you need to know, be honest with yourself. Know what you want, what you like. And you can do your research, see if Armenia offers it or not. If it doesn't, it just doesn't. But if it does, you'll manage. And regarding the people and networking, it's very possible, especially now with social media and all the events. When you go to events that you like, you'll meet people you have similar tastes, similar likings, and it just happens. And what I noticed, when Armenians like you, they love you for life, no matter what. So that was extremely surprising for me. And that's, I guess, one of the jewels of Armenian people.
Mm-hmm. Okay, Jeffrey, thank you. Lara,
I don't want to sound repetitive because I think what they mentioned was actually absolutely true, and what we've already discussed this this little while. I think my recommendation would be for people to be realistic with, just realistic. You coming to Armenia is not something where, what we imagine, what it's been like all this time when we're in the diaspora. We have this assumption that, I remember somebody told me, are you crazy? You're moving to Armenia? Don't you know they're full of thieves there? They're full of this. The coming here, testing it, even what he's been doing, coming for a week or two, even though that's not going to be the full picture, but don't just stay in Yerevan. Go outside of Yerevan. See the reality of the people living even in the Samanamets, like even in the, the frontiers, the borders. Tell yourself, can I actually live? Because Armenia is not just Yerevan, it's everything. So am I able to accept the reality of what's happening here, number one, as my own? Number two is, can I be realistic with, can I actually, if I move here, before I find a job, can I actually survive here for, 6 months, 1 year, until I actually understand what's going on? Maybe that's, the other thing is definitely reaching out. There's so many good tools now that we just never had 21 years ago. And I just envy whoever wants to move here, because everything is kind of now on a silver platter given to you, where to go to actually, for the OVIR to get your papers done, cadastre, or to actually own a house, or to, what are the budgets now? All of this is now given on these wonderful websites and these different artificial intelligence tools. But be realistic. Be grounded and down to earth. Don't, try to be open-minded that whatever you discover, whatever you see, whether it's a bad employer or a good employer, a bad restaurant customer service or a good restaurant, don't judge based on just those 1 or 2 or 3 experiences. It's so easy to say that's how the Armenians are. Say how much am I going to be offering? And last but not least, I have to say that I'm very grateful that there have been many different diasporans having to move here, because over the past 10, 15 years, it wasn't just the IT, but the diasporan people who actually started moving here changed the flavor and the color of how customer service is,
exactly.
Of how the companies should be managed.
Many industries.
So really the fact of having different cultures come here, Armenian but different countries, really is benefiting Armenia. We are living in a very dangerous, or at least militarily difficult zone, and we've survived the war, not just, from the first Artsakh, but also what happened in 2020 and 2023. We don't know what will happen, but if it's still relatively, we're in a space where I can say, if we don't bring more Armenians here, at least to protect or to grow, even having this land would be difficult in the next 50 years. So I really encourage people not to think that we're being a hero by moving here, but thinking realistically that there are so many good possibilities if we just really give the chance, and not always think outside is always better, because we always tend to criticize our own. We always tend to think everything outside that's non-Armenian is better than us. And I encourage all Armenians to always think, what can we do to support each other regardless of our differences, and really unite for this land.
Yeah, exactly, Lara. And I would just add that have your why, have the answer to your why. So why do you want to move, and why you don't want to move? So why you have chosen to stay where you live now. And whenever taking an important step, you have this why for yourself. You have answered this question, you have this purpose, the rest comes much easier. I wouldn't say definitely easier, but comes a bit easier. So if I want to move because I really want my kids to be raised in Armenian, to speak Armenian, to have this Armenian spirit, then I am ready to take all the challenges that come with it. But the end goal is this. Or if I'm moving, because there might be many becauses, but it's very important to have this coming from your heart. I have many friends who moved from Armenia and who live in different countries, in Europe, in the US, and who occasionally are thinking about coming back. But they don't have this courage because it's hard. You have gone through this adaptation period once when you left Armenia. 20 years ago, 25, I don't know, your parents gone through this process. Now you need to pass this process almost identical. I wouldn't say identical, but almost identical to what you or your family passed when they moved from Armenia. But one thing is for sure, you're coming home. And at some point, whether it's in a month, in 12 months, or I don't know, in 5 years, you're going to feel that. And as Armenians living in Armenia, born and raised in Armenia, like myself, I always have this sense of mission that I need to help many more Armenians to move. I need to have this small contribution of doing something that will help bring back Armenians. Because Lara, I fully agree with you. We need people to come back and to live in Armenia. That's the best, at least for 6 months a year. I'm always saying 6 months is enough, guys. Live 6 months in your countries, live 6 months in Armenia, contribute here, spend your holidays here. It will really, really change lots of things in your lives and in the lives of Armenians. So thank you very much. And I think most of the questions that I had on my paper, we talked about it. And if you want to add something as a summary or as a closure, you're welcome to do so now.
I would add one point of, as a repatriate, I think you have to stay. You have to have a positive attitude towards the life here. You have to be, as it was realistic, but still don't look at the worst parts. I mean, it is everywhere for sure. And there are things that are worse than in the place that you used to be. But you have to focus on the things that are better, that you can gain here. So this is what I wanted to add, because I have met people who are still unhappy here, having moved here, and still unhappy because of that. And as a person, I'm a positive person, so I kind of skipped that part. But I think it's all about your attitude, really.
Yeah, fully agree with you.
Personally, as she said as well, you need to look at the positive, because if you look at what Armenia has to offer, you can't find it almost anywhere. Very few countries you can actually find it, and if you do find it there, it comes with a huge price. Now, of course, Armenia isn't the best country. It's not like a first world country, industrial country at the moment, but it is getting there and it can improve. But it can improve if we all contribute. And a few years in the future, you'll look back and like you said, there was nothing. Now, there's almost something. Everything. So you need to be patient a bit. And the idea is when you look at the pros, they outweigh the cons. And that's what you need to focus on.
Thank you, Jeffrey.
I agree with you. I think one last point, Luiza, I want to say is for those who want to have children in the future, having been raised in North America and having lived in Europe and other parts of the world, I would have to say still, thankfully, still, Armenia is still the safest place to raise children. I mean, it's a bonus that you're raising them as Armenians now, and you don't have to worry about identity because they will be raised as Armenians because everything is Armenian. So that worry that an Armenian has outside, that, oh, I have to force them to speak Armenian, to learn to read and write, to do, that is gone. But that's not a reason for people to move here. But I'm just thinking, when I had my first child, and my child was in a car seat, and a person came, took my child to hold and love them, I was still in the Canadian mentality thinking, oh my God, they're kidnapping my child. Whereas when you understand that they're actually loving your child. So elders and children have a big value. I wouldn't say all the time because you still have abuse of women, but that's another story. But still, safety of raising a child or raising children, having a family is by far the safest place still here than anywhere else that I've been. So I really, apart from the job, I know we're talking about employment, but even just to think about, what are the other pros that Jeremy was saying? This is by far a big yes, which is, education, you'll still have difficulty finding the right school, but there's, you don't have gun issues like you do in the U.S. You don't have rape issues like you have in North America. The suicide rates. And if you just think about these issues in other countries, we're still pretty much a very homegrown, relatively safe, apart from, let's say, the military or political issues, it's still safe to raise children.
Yeah, exactly.
So thank you for that, and thank you for the last round of the table, and thank you for the invitation, Luiza.
Well, we have to thank Repat Armenia for inviting us all and have this interesting conversation here. I really hope that the ideas that were brought here and the advices that we gave, I think that, and I hope that those will help. And as always, when I am having as a podcast guest to my podcast, Repat person, someone who repatriated, I always say that if after my podcast one person thinks that maybe it's time to move to Armenia, then
we were successful.
Then we were successful. So I'm telling this for this podcast as well. There is so much to do that I want to end with that. There is so much to do in Armenia. And with little contribution, you can bring so much change. And we have so many bright repatriates that came here, that built here, and now we have thriving tech ecosystem because of a repatriate. We have thriving production ecosystem because of many repatriates. So in that perspective, we really need that expertise. But as Lara said, come grounded. And with no big expectations, just come here to build your life and to build Armenia together with us. Thank you very much. And this was a Haylight podcast.